They were the must-have tech treasures of their day that propelled us into modern life. They entertained and organized, granted access, captured memories, and got us from A to B in cutting-edge style. Until we traded them in for the latest and greatest.
Technology is moving very quickly.
But some are still worth a spin.
They still make records?
Just don't get too attached, because what's new will soon be old.
They still make CDs?
Now, Retro Tech on Modern Marvelous. Not that long ago, these relics were parts that lived inside our favorite gadgets. The ones we absolutely couldn't live without. The ones we reluctantly retired to attics and garages. These seemingly primitive products were once our connection to the world and to each other. And no matter what new innovations we embrace, we'll always recall the retro originals with nostalgic fondness. Remember that cumbersome cathode ray tube TV set and its annoying antenna? Since the 1940s, this icon was your ticket to a world of news and entertainment.
We didn't pay for anything. Advertising paid for everything. You didn't have a cable box. You didn't have wires connecting it. You didn't have a satellite dish.
To get that free TV signal, you either had an aerial roof antenna or a pair of rabbit ears sitting atop the set. The CRT TV owes its size and heft to the large tube and the lead-laden glass screen that protects the viewer from the harmful X-rays generated inside. In a CRT, the cathode is a heated filament. It sits in a vacuum inside a glass tube. The ray is a stream of electrons that pours off the cathode, becomes focused into a beam, and strikes the phosphor-coated back of the screen, making it glow. A magnet guides the beam as it sweeps 525 horizontal lines across the screen. Odd-numbered lines first, then the even, which makes up a video frame. This happens 30 times every second to create the picture.
This is a standard version of a CRT TV. It's a semi-fishbowl on the front of the screen, so it is a little bit more reflective as far as light goes. It's a little bit bigger on the back, it's a little bit heavier, and it's going to take up a little bit more space on your counter or shelf.
Did he say a little heavier?
TVs back then, I would say at least 150 to 200 pounds to lift, so you need two strapping males to lift that for you. Now, an old lady can lift one of the flat screen TVs. 40 or 42-inch screens weigh about 35, 40 pounds.
The original television signal was analog, and it looked decent enough, because frankly, we didn't know any better. Today, that analog signal isn't just obsolete, it's actually on the extinct list, thanks to the digital revolution powered by the binary code of ones and zeros.
An analog signal is a wave. Think of it as a up and down wave that's coming to you versus ones and zeros. The benefit of digital is we can continually increase how tight we pack those zeros and ones to get increasing high fidelity. In other words, high definition television today will be considered in 10 years low definition.
Digital TV broadcasts began in the late 1990s, and a decade later, analog's fate was sealed. These are the flat panel beauties that line the walls of today's electronics stores.
We have plasma screen TVs, we have LCD screen TVs. They're all high definition, and of course we're showing a beautiful high definition picture on these.
LCD and plasma technologies rely on small, streamlined components to deliver that superior picture quality, allowing the boob tube to go tubeless. The digital revolution triggered the decline of many technologies, most notably the vinyl LP. From the 50s to the 70s, perhaps no single possession was more treasured by American teenagers than their collection of vinyl records. Records on turntables and in jukeboxes provided the soundtrack to our most cherished memories. Perhaps you or your parents fell in love to the music being played on one of these. First, 8-track tapes, and then cassettes challenged vinyl's reign. But it was this digitally encoded piece of plastic that ultimately toppled the records regime. By the mid-'80s, the recording industry virtually stopped releasing on vinyl. Of course, if history teaches us anything, it's that what goes around often comes around. Since the turn of the 20th century, audiophiles have been grooving to the rich sounds of needle on record. Rainbow Records in Canoga Park, California, has been pressing vinyl discs since 1955.
At the time, we were probably making around 6,000 to 8,000 pieces a day. In the 60s, we got much larger, and we were in the neighborhood of 30,000 to 40,000 records a day. Our heyday was in '77 when Elvis died. Within 3 days, Elvis's death, we were pressing 60,000 records a day, 7 days a week.
By the late 80s, Rainbow was back down to pressing 8,000 to 10,000 vinyl records per day. But thanks to loyal listeners and avid collectors, records never completely went extinct. And today, something interesting is happening.
We are presently pressing close to 25,000 a day, 6 days a week. There's definitely a resurgence in vinyl.
Creating a vinyl record has always been part science, part mechanics, part craft. The modern method has its share of high-tech tweaks, but the basics have endured. In a studio, music is recorded as sound waves onto magnetic tape, or digital medium. Those sound patterns are fed into a computer-controlled lathe, where a heated sapphire tip cuts a continuous spiral groove into the surface of a lacquer-covered aluminum disc. The groove is a mechanical translation of the frequency and amplitude of the sound waves. Low bass tones produce a wide groove, while higher frequencies are narrower. Next, the lacquer is sent to Rainbow for duplication.
We're going to spray it with silver, then we're going to hang it into a tank and build a nickel surface on it.
The silver coating makes the surface conductive to electricity, allowing a current to pass through, and the nickel to adhere to it through electroplating.
Then we're going to separate the two pieces. And then you had a positive, and now you have a negative.
The A and B side negatives, called the master, are placed back in the electroplating tank to create positives, called the mother. From the mother, up to 40 pairs of negative stampers, which will press the final records, can be made before quality degrades. Now science gives way to the mechanics and craft of record making.
This is a record press. We have two labels, two stampers which have the information on it. We glue the stamper onto the mold, so you got an A side and a B side. You got an A side and a B side label. Workers
pour PVC pellets into the machine, where they're melted and formed into a malleable puck that will become the disc.
The polyvinyl chloride, or PVC, is about 330 degrees. The press is about 330 degrees when it closes. Goes under 1,800 pounds of pressure. And it squeezes out, and it's kind of like making a waffle. Instead of pouring in batter, we're pouring in vinyl.
About 30 seconds later, the formed disc emerges on the other side.
After the record gets pressed and it gets cooled down, it comes out to the trimming station, and the trimming station trims off the excess. This excess will recycle and use again once the record is trimmed, as that record is finished, other than quality control and packaging.
By contrast, Rainbow makes CDs, about 100,000 a day, in sterile-looking rooms on the other side of the factory. Industry-wide, CD's market share has been dwindling, thanks in large part to digital downloads, and in small part to the resurgence of vinyl. But for some, the record was never superseded. This is a digital-free zone.
Welcome to The Record Collector, which I established in 1974 with my personal collection of 50,000 78s, another 450,000 LPs, 300,000 classical, 100,000 jazz, and 100,000 other. And the records go 13 feet high.
Sandy is passionate about vinyl and not shy with his opinion of CDs.
It loses a lot of the body and nuance to the original performance, and authenticity is everything. And if there's no authenticity and no integrity, and you're going to superimpose technical gadgetry as a good substitute for your musical experience, I think you're being had.
Any record lover would be hard-pressed to find a richer trove of vinyl treasures.
It is the first complete recording of Carmen by Bizet, recorded in 1913, issued in Berlin, Germany, on gramophone records. The Mozart 40th Symphony, recorded in 1926. Bruno Walter conducting the Berlin State Opera Orchestra, recorded in Berlin.
It's not just the classics that live on vinyl. Today's big-selling artists are back on the turntable, and the kids are finding out what their parents already knew.
There's audiophile guys who are still buying records. But what's really driving it today is 13 to 24-year-olds who have discovered this new thing called a record. You know, people always ask you what you do for a living, and I would always say, you know, I make CDs and records, and I would always hear, they still make records? And, you know, I tell them how many we make, and they're always amazed. Recently, I was at a party sitting at a table, and same conversation. I said, we make records, CDs, and the comment back to me was, they still make CDs?
In 2008, Americans discarded nearly 700,000 tons worth of tube TVs, of which only 18% were recycled. The bottom line? More than 46,000 tons of lead found its way back into the environment. Retro Tech will return on Modern Marvels. As we said goodbye to our turntables and rabbit ears, we welcomed a new era, the computer era. The modern computer is always evolving, but one thing has remained constant: the trusty keyboard. The birthplace of the keyboard, the typewriter, became obsolete in the 1980s, but only after its reign as one of the most ubiquitous machines of the 20th century.
The typewriter definitely was a revolution. Before that, you had to handwrite everything, and a good typist can type faster than the fastest writer can write. Let's face it, something that I write may not be able to even be read by anyone, but from a typewriter, you can all read what's typed.
The typewriter attracted women into the workforce and brought structure and uniformity to the business world. It became a virtual appendage of writers, secretaries, and news reporters. American inventor Christopher Sholes and two partners developed the first commercially manufactured typewriter in 1874.
They had Remington and Sons, it was a manufacturer of guns and sewing machines, make their first typewriters.
The odd-looking contraption was more of a curiosity at first, and slow to be accepted, because business and personal correspondence had always been conducted in longhand. Mark Twain, who was reportedly the first to submit a typewritten manuscript, despised it because he considered it awkward. Even the earliest Remingtons boasted that initially confusing letter key layout. The QWERTY keyboard, so called for the first 6 letters on the top row, became the universally accepted design. Some say this arrangement allowed salesmen to type the word typewriter more easily when demonstrating the product, because all the required letters are in the top row. But the more practical explanation is that frequently used letters had to be separated so the keys wouldn't stick. In the 1930s, companies began developing electric typewriters with limited success and only in the business market.
The huge development in typewriters was in 1961 when the IBM Selectrix came out. It had a single golf ball type shaped element, and you pressed the key and it would spin to the correct letter and then strike. Then in the early 1970s, IBM created the correcting Selectrix typewriter. Because before that time, you either had to use an eraser, which usually didn't work too well and got a lot of eraser crumbs in the typewriter, or you had to use something like liquid correcting fluid.
One version of the correcting typewriter contained a cartridge with an ink-coated cloth ribbon. Another was a correctable carbon film. After a typo, the user hit the corrector key, followed by the mistyped letter key. To correct ink-coated ribbon, a cover-up tape strikes the mistake, making it disappear. A carbon film error could be lifted right off the paper. This primitive delete function may have extended the typewriter's lifespan by a few years. But once computers took hold in the mid-1980s, there was no fighting progress. The mighty typewriter that served us so well for nearly a century had fallen by the wayside. A similar fate befell another printing icon developed in the late 1800s, the mimeograph. The mimeograph employed an ink-fed drum, around which a cut waxed stencil rotated as successive sheets of paper were fed into it. Then in 1959, a revolutionary invention from the company whose name became synonymous with copying spelled doom for the mimeograph. The Xerox 914 copier combined photoconductivity with electrostatic printing, changing business forever.
So we went from a mimeograph where you had to turn a drum to being able to push a button and make 1,000 copies on a Xerox machine and have them stapled and collated, to now making digital copies of things that maybe will never even be a paper copy.
But there's one industry that must continue relying on paper copies, at least for the time being. Since the first continuously published newspaper emerged in 1704, Americans have looked to their trusty gazettes to keep them aware of the goings-on in their community, their country, and the world. Reading the morning paper over coffee is a deep-rooted ritual that prepares us for the day to come. But after 3 centuries of success, does the newspaper have an uncertain future? The top 25 American daily papers posted an average circulation drop of 7% between 2007 and 2008. But why? In a word, competition. Newspapers have encountered competition before, but now they're creating it. The Houston Chronicle, one of the top 10 U.S. dailies, is owned by the Hearst Corporation, one of this network's parent companies. The paper launched its website in 1994.
There's been radio, there's been television, and today we see the internet. But what we've decided to do this time is to embrace and coexist with the internet and use technology to our advantage.
These days, the Houston Chronicle's website, chron.com, averages about 80 million page views per month, while circulation of the print edition hovers around 500,000 per weekday. Under the supervision of the Chronicle's editor-in-chief, both news entities collaborate in an endeavor reliant on hundreds of reporters. For them, the lines between print and online are blurred, since both editions depend on their work.
They go out and they cover events, and then in a very tight window of time, they're bringing that story back. A headline writer is putting a compelling headline on it. Illustrators and page layout people are making the stories attractive and visually pleasing. They're adding a contemporary look.
The finalized layout goes to the print plant, where these giant presses spit out papers at a dizzying speed.
And then it is on the doorstep of the reader by 5:30 in the morning.
Now, Compare the expenses of the printed daily paper to the online version.
We use about 200 metric tons of newsprint every day and about 9,000 pounds of ink a day.
A newspaper website has servers that maybe cost thousands of dollars. It doesn't have multi-million-dollar presses. It does not have the delivery costs that a newspaper does. You don't have the trucks and the rising gas prices to worry about.
And online offers another big advantage that print does not.
The biggest difference between online and print is that print is a snapshot of a point in time. It's a picture of what the world looked like at 10:30 last night. The website is continually being updated throughout the day.
To feed the online edition as well as print, journalists have had to adapt.
When I was a reporter many years ago, I could spend most of the day writing a 750-word story. But today, that's not the case.
With the development of the web, virtually every job in the newsroom has changed. Reporters have become bloggers, photographers have become videographers, editors have become web producers. Even our editorial cartoonist today is producing animations in 3D.
So are newspapers ready to pull the plug on the press?
Today, if we shut down the printed newspaper and just published a website, we'd be isolating ourselves from about a third of the population in Houston. Because as much as the internet has become ubiquitous, it has not reached everyone.
But how long will the two editions continue to coexist?
There are a lot of people, 78 million baby boomers to be precise, that are using both right now. But the young teenagers of today, they are growing up fully digital.
We're in the middle of a media revolution, and revolutions don't end in a tie.
Still, there will always be something soothing about doing the Sunday crossword puzzle in pen. Okay, maybe pencil. In 1951, Jack Kerouac typed on the road during a 3-week marathon. To minimize interruption, he taped pages of paper together in a continuously feeding roll. The final single-spaced manuscript was a scroll nearly 120 feet long. Retro Tech will return on Modern Marvels. The MP3 player replaced the Discman. The Discman replaced the Walkman. And the Walkman replaced the turntable. No matter how much we loved each one, the availability of more compact options was certainly attractive. The same held true for our cameras, phones, and organizers.
The first cameras were definitely not personal cameras. It was a big, giant device that went on a big, giant tripod. You had to be a pro. But then as they were able to make the cameras smaller and smaller, it started to become something that you and I could do.
Capturing and sharing memories became family traditions. But it wasn't always so convenient, until one company indulged our need for instant gratification.
You bought a roll of film, put it in a camera, and when the film was all exposed, you took it to the drugstore, you mailed it away. The Model 95 was introduced in 1948. And with the introduction of this camera and Polaroid instant film, we could produce pictures right on the spot, wherever you were.
Instant pictures. Today we take them for granted, but in 1948, the Polaroid was revolutionary. The user took the picture, then pulled the tab. The negative and receiving sheet slid through a set of rollers, causing a pod of chemicals embedded in the receiving sheet to burst. The rollers distributed the chemicals across the negative, triggering a chemical reaction that processed the image. 90 seconds later, the negative was peeled away and discarded. In 1972, Polaroid introduced the SX70, which was able to develop images without tabs to pull and negatives to peel. It wasn't that long ago that we had a separate camera, phone, address book, calendar, music player, and computer. But today, the market is flooded with feature-laden combination gadgets that fit in the palm of your hand, each rendering a previous version obsolete. The aptly named Palm Incorporated in Sunnyvale, California, pioneered the granddaddy of must-have pocket tools.
In 1997, we came out with the Palm Pilot. This really represented cultural phenomena in mobile computing is it gave you a way of entering information on the go without a full keyboard. It was a stylus-based interaction where you would actually write in characters. It actually forced you to learn a very specific way to write your letters.
Despite the added effort required on the part of the user, this glorified address book was surprisingly successful and entered the vernacular as a synonym for personal digital assistants, or PDAs, regardless of the brand.
The original Palm Pilot had your contacts, it had tasks and memos, basic calculator, and it organized it into one place with one magical killer app. That killer app was synchronization with your computer. So all of that information was protected.
While the Palm Pilot was organizing your life, the cell phone was keeping you in touch. By today's standards, the early versions were pricey, unreliable, and goofy looking. But it was freedom from the cord, and that was worth it. If you had one of these, you were pretty cool. The evolution of cellular phones rendered some old faithfuls obsolete, from rotary dial models and payphones to car phones. Some even predict the demise of the hallowed landline, the cornerstone of modern communication that served us so well since the days of Alexander Graham Bell. Today, the cell phone meets the organizer, meets the computer, and a bunch of other features. It's called the smartphone, and unlike its ancestors, it has a keyboard. And it's still smaller.
Keyboards are a big story because they are the transition from handhelds to smartphones. The unconventional wisdom here is that really big, full-size keyboards work, but tiny keyboards work just as well because you're using your thumbs.
The smartphone is a nail in the coffin for many of our trusty devices because it really is the sum of its parts.
Our first real iconic phone, which was the Trio 600 in 2003, was one of the first true smartphones. And then in 2007, we delivered Centro, which is putting an incredible amount of power into a tiny package, but also making it really inexpensive and accessible.
The phone is evolving in not one direction, but in multiple directions. It's going to be your bank. It's going to be your credit card. It's going to be your educational tool. It's going to be your training tool. It's going to be your radio. It's going to be your keys. It's going to be how you buy things, how you board a plane. This is going to be your ticket for your next airplane flight. You see, it's evolving into many, many aspects of different infrastructure that'll be all merged together in a wireless way because that phone is going to get smarter and smarter.
But will all these advantages render face-to-face human interaction obsolete?
The biggest problem with smartphones is we don't also have smart users. We get addicted to the phone so much that we forget a very important thing. There's a time to plug in and a time to unplug.
Thomas Edison lobbied successfully for the word hello to be used as the standard telephone greeting, much to the dismay of Alexander Graham Bell, who preferred ahoy, ahoy. Retro Tech will return on Modern Marvels. Everyone remembers their first love and their first car. For some, they were one and the same. Few car aficionados are more enamored with their vehicles than classic Mustang lovers. They drive their collectibles, shine them up, show them off, and discuss them with other classic Mustang lovers. But underneath the hoods of their retro babies is an outdated technology.
What we have here today is two Shelbys. 1968 KR 500, 2009 GT 500. We are going to show you the difference of technology from yesterday to today. Starting with this 68 KR right here. Let's open the hood here. It's got a 428 Cobra Jet normal carbureted motor in it.
Up until the 1980s, most cars relied on a carburetor to power the combustion engine. Air travels in from outside, past a filter, and into the carburetor. Pressure on the gas pedal allows a regulated amount of air and a regulated amount of fuel into the chamber where they mix. The throttle valve allows the air-fuel blend to enter the engine.
Over here, fuel injection. You have fuel injectors on each cylinder. You have a fuel rail. You have an equalizer tube. Like there, you have a throttle body. You have an electronic fuel equalizer, pressurized pump right here.
So what's the upside to this complicated fuel injection system?
This car can get 25 miles a gallon. This could probably get 12 to 15. And the reason is because all the extra excess fuel that's not burned gets thrown out the back, and it smokes and it smells good, and everybody goes, oh my God, I want an old car. Here, you don't smell anything because it's engineered perfect. So it actually burns every last minuscule of fuel and air. Well, that's the good part. The bad part is I can work on this, and a lot of people can work on this. And here, I need like an engineering degree and a laptop.
Just another case of mechanical versus computerized. For some, no computer chips can ever replace the soulful roar of the engine and the familiar smell of exhaust. It's not just the insides of cars that demanded a makeover. Bumpers and paint have also evolved. Imagine today's freeways full of these lead-painted, steel-bumpered dinosaurs.
Some of the interesting ingredients that have been used in the paint are metal flakes, fish scales, which were added to give another kind of iridescent look. Base paints used to be lead, then they went to water base.
Body styles and bumper designs have changed to reflect tastes and ever-improving safety regulations.
Back in the 1970s, when we started the heavy focus on safety standards, we went to the 5-mile-per-hour bumpers, which, when applied to existing automobile designs of the time, were pretty unattractive.
In the 70s, we had shock absorber bumpers, and at the same time, we started with the rubber across the front chrome of the bumpers, which became a standard later on in the design of the cars. This is an '89 Porsche Speedster, the heavy rubber across here and no chrome to the car. This is an '06 Ford Mustang, and here you can see the fiberglass bumper as opposed to the chrome bumpers, and no rubber integrated here. It's all part of the whole design of the car.
But first things first. Before you can enjoy your car's fuel injections and safety features, you have to get in. Even that has changed. Nearly gone are the days of the metal door and ignition key.
You still have a driver's side key entry, but you don't see a door lock anywhere on the passenger side door. In due course, we're going to see an end to the ignition key, door key.
The keyless remote, first available in the early 1980s, got us halfway there. The latest high-end cars to roll off the assembly line incorporate something far more intuitive.
This car was locked, but it sensed my presence and it now is unlocked. How it did that is with this smart key. I didn't have to take that out of my pocket. Don't have to do anything but just keep it on my body. It'll actually open the car for me, and to start it, I just sit in the car, hit the button, it starts itself. Don't have to stick this in anything. It's called smart key technology.
Perhaps someday all doors will unlock instinctively. But until then, this plastic key card isn't a bad option. It's what has made millions of metal hotel room keys and those obligatory dangling numbered keychains obsolete. In the late 1970s, to combat key theft and subsequent hotel crime, the lodging industry started to do away with the standard metal key in favor of a reprogrammable, disposable solution. The Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas has over 3,400 rooms and issues 2.4 million key cards each year.
Upon registration, we gain access to the customer's reservation. Actually go to the key making application, punch in for a brand new key, and we're all set.
The computer encodes the card's magnetic strip with the check-in, check-out dates, as well as the particular room's sequential numeric access code.
The locks understand what key is due to come in based on the previous customer's sequence. Since we cut this key downstairs just now, this would be the next one in the sequence. You'd get the green light to be able to access the guest room. If you were to try to access the room through a non-sequential or an expired key, you'd be getting the yellow light, which would not allow you access. If you improperly insert the key into the guest lock, you would get a red light.
400,000 of the key cards the Flamingo issues each year are never returned. And at 4 cents a pop, that costs the hotel 16 grand. But it's a small price to pay for the increased security and convenience over metal keys. So how long before the old faithful metal key goes completely extinct?
Physical metal keys that we deal with today will increasingly become obsolete, but it will be slow. The reason it'll be slow is there are a lot of us that still have homes and still have devices that need metal keys. And let's face it, to change all of the locks in your home, a lot of people are not going to do that very quickly.
And there's something to be said about the secure feeling of hearing that lock turn. In 2007, a 1966 Shelby Cobra 427 Super Snake fetched a world record auction price for an American car, $5.5 million. Retrotech will return on Modern Marvels. If your favorite music and videos still live on the obsolete formats, and your players bite the proverbial dust, are you out of luck? Fear not. There is a way to salvage and preserve your treasures in more current formats by using media transfer hardware and software.
We recognized that everyone had some of the old media, either LPs, VHS tapes, tape cassettes, and they were storing them, but they weren't playing them. The actual hardware to play back this medium is disappearing. That's when we conceived of the idea of transfer technology, turning this into something you could use. Basically, it takes an analog format and transfers it into a digital format. So it's kind of like old school meets new school.
The LP DOC is the easiest way to convert music from vinyl to digital. It's actually going to record a WAV file that you can then process in your computer if you wanted to, or just for easy play on your iPod.
Anticipating that some customers might be technologically challenged, they've made it as simple as installing the software on your computer and following a few easy steps.
Once my recording is done, I can just go ahead and type the name of the artist, name of the album, and the track title.
The tape-to-PC cassette converter works much the same way.
And now what was once in here, I can just throw away this tape because it's all digital.
But not all memories are audio. Odds are you still have a few VHS tapes of cherished home movies lying around your house. With the VCR to PC, all of this can now fit onto this.
Where you can take thousands of videos and just put them on your hard drive. And once I have it on my hard drive, I can go ahead and burn it into a DVD or put it into a portable device.
All your old stuff can now live on your new computer. But what happens in the future when that new computer is suddenly old? It's inevitable that you'll eventually bid farewell to your once treasured electronic gadgets. You have a choice. You can toss them into the drawer or the trash, or you can give them the respectful and responsible end they deserve by taking your old equipment to an electronics recycling facility like E-Waste Center in Commerce, California.
Our facility here is about 40,000 square feet, and we take in anywhere from 200,000 to 300,000 pounds of e-waste a month.
This gadget graveyard serves as a collection hub for discarded tech, including TVs, computers, office equipment, and cell phones.
The most common item we get here are TV CRTs, and we get about 5,000 of them a month.
These TVs are among the 27 million that were taken out of service in the U.S. in 2007. So what happens to them and the rest of the e-waste that comes here?
We weigh it, we sort it, and it's taken to the dismantling line where the metals are taken apart, the plastics are taken out, the circuit boards are taken out, the glass, everything's just demanufactured. So think of a manufacturing line, but backwards.
This process is mostly done by hand so as not to contaminate the reusable materials with the harmful ones, like the lead found in CRT TVs. Some of the reusable components need to be compressed for easier transport.
imagine a giant trash compactor, but for plastics and metals. And these are sent off to processors where they will be melted and remanufactured.
There just may be life after death. But be careful, because some of that outdated equipment might contain important data.
Because everybody has sensitive information on their computers, whether it's for personal use or for business use, make sure that when you take it to an e-waste recycler, to ask them to physically destroy your hard drive. Deleting it will not do. As part of the recycling process, we remove the hard drives from the computer, and upon a request, we will destroy the hard drives by punching 3 holes into the disk itself so that the data is unretrievable.
But it's not just the information that might leak into the wrong places.
The rate of technological change and obsolescence, of course, has a dark, deep, and bad downside.
Some environmentally and socially irresponsible companies export unwanted electronics overseas, where they are dismantled unsafely, often by children paid pennies a day.
There are a lot of quote-unquote recyclers that will send their electronic waste to underdeveloped countries where they don't have strict environmental laws and labor laws. So right now there are villages where people are actually cooking the circuit boards and inhaling the toxic fumes and then disposing of the waste into their water supply as well as their soil. However, recyclers like us, we use responsible downstream vendors who have high-tech facilities to handle these hazardous materials in the proper way.
Today, with technology evolving at near light speed, don't get too attached to your TVs and cell phones, because their days are numbered.
I'm sure that our laptops and our MP3 players in 10 or 20 years will be collecting dust.
Innovation and change is not slowing down, it is speeding up. Be ready.